In this edition of Southern Newsweek, we cover Armistice Day commemorations around the regions, starting with the service at Dunedin's cenotaph. A Dunedin rally driver shares her thoughts on a potential change to some open road speed limits, and a famous coffee brand undergoes a $20 million overhaul to cope with growing demand. Kia ora, I'm Holly Buchanan. Much of the country came to a standstill recently to commemorate the signing of the armistice. The South Today has coverage from around the region, beginning at the cenotaph in Dunedin, where the heavens opened just before 11 a.m.
Memories flooded back, as if past conflicts had only happened yesterday. At today's armistice commemoration at Dunedin Cenotaph, a gentle rain began, but became steadily heavier. However, it wasn't enough to dampen the powder on the 25-pound field gun, which fired on the stroke of the 11th hour, of the 11th day, of the 11th month.
Hello! Load! Fire!
While this was an all too common sight and sound for ground troops, World War II veteran flying officer Francis Neville Selwood remembers the war in the skies. Selwood says even though it's many decades ago, he remembers the large numbers of people who never returned.
I particularly remember, of course, the 55,628 men out of 122,000 who were killed in Bomber Command. But then I think of all the men in the Navy and the Army and the other branches of the Air Force. It's just terrible to remember, really.
He says younger generations can learn a lot from the mistakes of the past. And while he believes World War II was a necessary war, he's not convinced the Great War was. RSA Otago Southlands District President Jennifer Glover describes Neville Selwood and people like him as a taonga.
Oh, they're living treasures. They absolutely are, and it's an honour to spend 5 minutes in their company, and they give credibility to commemorations like this.
She says it's important for all New Zealanders to remember the fallen and returned service personnel.
It's very important to commemorate Armistice Day every year because we owe it to the memory of those fallen, those who gave their lives, and to their families. Our older people, our veterans, their families, they rely on this. It reinforces that the sacrifice that their loved ones made wasn't in vain.
The torch of remembrance has been passed to another generation, with young families braving the elements, and particularly with St Hilda's pupil Lola Garden, who shared her winning speech from the Cyril Bassett VC speech competition. At the coming down of the rain, we did remember them. Daryl Baser, The South Today.
And the Upper Clutha now has a far more complete record of the young men and women who'd served and died in the First World War. The first shipment of a book correcting errors and filling in gaps has arrived in Wanaka just in time for its launch on Armistice Day. Mike Price spoke to the small group of historians behind the project.
The memorial on the hill above Lake Wanaka has some of the names of those in the district who served in World War I, but now there is a more detailed and correct record in the form of a 277-page book called Courageous and Free, compiled from information gathered over the last 2 years.
I suggested we do a little booklet on the names on the Wanaka Memorial, and the project grew, and I'm not sure how it happened, but we were asked to do a much wider area of the Upper Clutha memorials. And then we found names that weren't on any memorial, so it just grew of its own accord, really. Obviously, it was a need that needed to be met, I think.
A display of some of the material gathered from newspapers, archives, diaries and letters has been set up in the Wanaka Library. The historians have been as thorough as possible, but do not discount the possibility there is more information out there.
We started off with 33 names, and we've now got 48 names. That's of people who were killed, and the returned soldiers, we've listed those. We started off with a list of about 80 names, and there's 148 of those. So There's been a fair bit of trolling through old newspapers looking for names and connections.
About 200 men and women from the Upper Clutha served during World War I from a population of only about 1,000.
Direct descendants, there aren't that many because of course they were all young unmarried men who went to war and were killed before they'd had a chance to have a family, so they're usually the brothers and sisters of the men who were killed and their descendants. But they are so proud of their soldiers, and they provided us with last letters home and postcards and photographs and wonderful things that made the stories come alive, I think.
The first shipment of books arrived from the Auckland publisher in time for today's launch, with more to come. I'm Mark Price for the South Today.
The government is proposing to increase the open road speed limit in some areas to 110 kilometres per hour. A Dunedin-based rally driver agrees in certain areas it could be a good idea.
Driving on city roads can be more dangerous than racing at high speeds on a clear road. That's according to one who knows. Dunedin's Emma Gilmore is used to racing at speeds like this, but believes city driving is more dangerous to people than motorsport.
This year I thought it would be a good thing just to add to what I do with through my Facebook and my social media, is to share just my thoughts on driving, because it's something that I'm always thinking about when I'm driving around the city streets. Even though what I do, rally driving, is normally high speed stuff, I'm really passionate about the road safety.
She says apart from speed, there are some other obvious differences between rallying and standard road driving.
The difference with rally driving obviously is that you have the road completely to yourself. There's no oncoming traffic and you're in a car that's designed for safety. You've got a roll cage around you, you've got safety harness, decent seats, you've also got a helmet on, and the road is yours basically. There's nothing else to worry about. Versus on the road, there's so many things going on. You've always got the oncoming traffic. You've just got a single white line basically separating you between a car coming the opposite direction at 100 kilometres an hour.
The government has begun discussing raising the open road limit to 110 kilometres an hour in some places. So far, this has been approved by the Automobile Association. Emma Gilmore also believes it's a good idea on some roads, but she knows people's reaction times need to be sharper with increased speed.
I think it's progressive thinking that they're thinking we can increase the speed limit on some of our roads, and some of the roads are well designed to allow us to do that. But I think that the concern is that we're not also furthering educating our drivers on the road, which is all of us. It's not just the other people as we always seem to think of them.
Gilmore believes that all drivers should take on a driver's education refresher course every 5 to 10 years. Gilmore has begun posting regular driving tips on her Facebook page. Daryl Baser, The South Today.
The New Zealand Coastal Society's 24th annual conference is underway in Dunedin. The Society's main aim is to broaden communication around coastal issues. These were brought to the fore after the recent North Canterbury earthquake and tsunami warnings.
Calling for a better system for alerting people to a coastal disaster. This week's North Canterbury earthquake and tsunami warnings for coastal New Zealand brought the need for efficient and timely communication into focus. The chairman of the New Zealand Coastal Society, Rick Leifting, says some lessons can be learned from this week's offence.
Look, I think we responded very, very well with the information that we had at hand. One of the big things that have come out of this is, look, it is what it was in terms of the information that was available. One of the key things out of it though is the messaging around that and the alerting. I think that's where we do need to have some more work on.
Dunedin South MP Claire Curran was the keynote speaker at this morning's session. She says central government needs to be more involved in the issues that affect coastal New Zealand.
Central government can show leadership, and that because we've got more than one coastal community affected by rising sea levels and coastal erosion, we really do need to see it as a central government issue rather than just a local government issue.
The Dunedin South Member of Parliament says the coastline has been grossly affected ever since colonisation.
In the 1840s, Pākehās moved in, and what that impact has been. And one of the biggest issues is that there needs to be central government involved in the future and looking at the future and developing a master plan.
The conference continues over the next few days And Rick Leifting says the main thrust of his talk will focus on coastal inundation.
What the Waikato Regional Council have produced is a coastal inundation tool. So it provides the user with an interactive way to actually see what if we had a half a metre or a metre or some other level of sea level rise and what areas would be affected.
The New Zealand Coastal Society's theme for this conference is He Waka Eke Noa, which the Society says translates as a canoe in which we are all in with no exception. Delegates are due to tour some of Dunedin's coastal areas over the next few days. Daryl Baser, The South Today.
A historic Dunedin-based coffee producer has received a multi-million-dollar overhaul. The Greg's coffee roasting facility has redeveloped its production line to meet growing demand for the caffeinated drink.
Sarah Boss Greg's is reopening its Dunedin-based coffee roasting facility after a $20 million redevelopment. The company began in the city over 150 years ago with founder William Gregg. CEO Terry Svensson says the upgrades will improve both production and employee satisfaction.
I guess the more noticeable changes over the last 3 years has been new production lines that we've put in place. We've got new warehousing and distribution facilities. We've actually extended that given the quantity of coffee that we put through this facility. And of course updated the amenities for our employees.
The upgrade includes an open plan office and better staff car parking facilities. Greg's employees produce thousands of tonnes of coffee each year in a variety of flavours. Svensson says the extension will better serve a growing demand for coffee in New Zealand.
We've certainly seen an increase. I mean, New Zealanders are drinking more coffee each year, and that's good for companies like ours that roast coffee.
A large group gathered at the 4th Street factory to receive a guided tour. Svensson and Dunedin Mayor Dave Cull also spoke about the importance of the historic site. Cull says the coffee roasting facility is a significant employer for the city.
This is a significant investment and expresses the confidence that Sarah Boss Greg's has in the Dunedin community and the Dunedin economy, and we really appreciate it.
The site currently employs 56 people making both fresh and instant coffee. They produce some of New Zealand's best-known brands, including Greg's, Robert Harris and Bruno Rossi. Jack Conroy, The South Today.
Coming up on Southern Newsweek, we take a look at the history behind the naming of a new vessel, and we'll find out why the Gypsy way of life is becoming an attractive alternative to property ownership. Welcome back. A naming ceremony has taken place in Port Chalmers for a new vessel. It's named after an important woman in the history of the resident iwi. And Port Otago staff say they're proud to use the new name.
Staff of Port Otago and many others have gathered to witness the naming of a new tugboat. Delivered in a heavy lift vessel, the boat came in late August. And Port Otago says it's a much needed replacement for an older tug.
Our older workboat, the Kapu, is at the end of its life. The Arihi is a much more versatile vessel, which we can use for our dredging operations, but also part of our towage operations to assist with the arrival and departure of vessels.
At 145 gross tonnage and 18.70 metres in length, the Arihi is larger than its predecessor. The acquisition has not affected staff size, as the crew from the retiring boat will be moved to the new vessel. But Plunkett says there might be a bit of a learning curve for a different system.
It's much newer, it's a bit bigger, more modern technology. The Kapu is very old, and so a lot more electronics and your more modern navigation.
The name comes from Arahi Karatai, who was born in 1861 and became an important figure to Otago Ruananga. The group came to bless the vessel, and Plunkett says they have a special relationship with Port Otago.
So it's a great honour for us to be able to use the name Arihi on the tug. We very much see the Otago Ruananga as the guardians of the harbour, and they can watch the Arihi go past the marae for many years to come.
The boat was constructed in April by the world-renowned Sanmar shipyards in Turkey. Jack Conroy, The South Today.
The lack of affordable houses is a constant issue in New Zealand, particularly for young people, and stretching incomes to cover a big mortgage is the approach many take. However, on the road around Otago at the moment is a group of people taking a different approach. Mike Price caught up with one young couple in Wanaka who've turned their backs on property ownership and run away with the Gypsy Extravaganza.
60-year-old Bedford bus, hand-painted and a bit rough around the edges. But the windows offer views just as good as any to be had from a more modern and expensive vehicle. The Bedford is home to carver and tattooist Jasmine Cullen and her partner Ben Smith, who are following a different route to most young people.
There was no way we were ever going to afford a house, and we both struggle with working sort of 9-to-5 jobs under people where we're not appreciated, and I kind of just, you get to see the country. Like, I haven't travelled overseas, but I also haven't seen a lot of New Zealand, so I'm getting to see my country first, and you know, it's just it's an amazing way to see it. You see so much more in a bus than you do in a car.
It absolutely beats a mortgage, and I guess there's only going to be more people getting involved with it, I guess.
While they do have a bit of an IOU with a parent, and living in a bus does cost, the pair have no mortgage, rates or power bills.
It's like a broad number. We have a home and a business for under $50,000, so that's a really achievable amount to pay back in a lifetime, and you can still live pretty good while you're doing it, so that's helpful. We're not like eating Wheat-Bix and
Can you see a day when you won't do it? I mean, how long?
Nah, no way. I want to do this forever. Ever since I was a little kid, this is what I wanted to do. But I mean, we'll probably get a patch of dirt somewhere. Hopefully, it is nice to have like somewhere stable. But no, this is it for us. Totally, we'll do kids and this and everything, and just make lofts and pop outs and all sorts of weird things to accommodate children.
The building criteria or the building code, I guess, for house buses and house trucks is a lot less strict, I guess, in comparison to building on land, you know. We just have dimensions that we have to stay within, and that's pretty much it.
For the last 6 weeks, the pair have been part of the Gypsy Extravaganza, touring Otago with their crafts and skills. And living with the Gypsies is no temporary working holiday.
Yeah, we fit in really good. Everyone's really like-minded. We all kind of have similar worldviews, or at least more tolerance than most people that I've met, so yeah.
What's the worldview of the Extravaganza?
What's the worldview of the Extravaganza? Just love and good times, and just trying to change the world a bit, I think. Most of us are solar powered, even though we're big diesel grunty things, we're trying to offset our sort of carbon emissions and whatnot, and most of our packaging's eco-friendly, and yeah, we're just trying to like do a good thing for communities and also for the environment, and just lead a cool example for people, because I think lots of people are going to move into buses and house trucks and things. It's gonna happen. Yeah, no way our generation is going to struggle to afford houses, but we can pay things like this off, and it's a home.
The main downside of being on the road in a 14-metre long bus and caravan is finding a park. Jasmine, Ben and their bus are in Wanaka this weekend, and the West Coast is next. Mark Price for the South Today.
It was the soundtrack to our lives, and it took the world by storm. A new book by Ian Chapman offers a retrospective on the influential Dunedin music of the 70s, 80s and 90s. The Dunedin Sound, Some Disenchanted Evening, examines how the music shook things up here in New Zealand and abroad.
It started with 3 chords and a DIY attitude. It became a worldwide phenomenon.
I'm Roselle Lavone, and I'm here outside the Empire, which is currently undergoing renovations. Legend has it that this is where the Dunedin Sound began.
20 years ago, you might have seen acts like the Verlaines and the Clean hit this stage. Groups like these on the Flying Nun label influenced bands from Nirvana to Pavement. If you heard a memorable riff from the 80s or 90s, the chances are Dunedin bands did it first. Today, the sound is having a renaissance with a new book by Ian Chapman. He's been asking people to send in their photos and memories for the book.
When I saw all this stuff, I thought, wow, actually, I've got a bit of an obligation to preserve some visual history here, so I changed the format of the book from being 50-50 visual text to probably about 70-30 in favour of the images.
Chapman says the music could have only come from one time and place.
I think that was unique, and can never happen again. The world's a much smaller place now. Dunedin is not isolated like it was, which was a part of the mix, not all of it. The social circumstances are very different today. Back then we had the division with the Springbok tour, with nuclear testing protests, nuclear warship visit protests. There was such a lot of angst in the air.
Several musicians from the Dunedin scene are performing together later this month. For Chapman, it's like seeing his old mates down at the pub.
I'm delighted. There's going to be 3 acts playing. Graham Downs from the Verlaines, they're all doing solo sets. Graham Downs from the Verlaines, Martin Phillips from the Chills, and Bob Scott from the Clean and the Bats are going to be performing for us.
He's been a consultant on a fascinating new interactive Kiwi music exhibition and hopes this and his book will bring a new generation in search of that Dunedin sound. And if Chapman's music collection is anything to go by, those kids could be hooked for a very long time. Rosella Bone, The South Today.
After the break on Southern Newsweek, a day in the life of Dunedin residents goes on display and millions of dollars in racing cars take to the track at Highlands. Welcome back. A digital photography project by Otago Polytechnic students has gone on display. The images are a snapshot into the daily lives of Dunedin residents, and it's hoped that people looking at them 100 years from now will gain a sense of how we live today.
A Day in the Life was a book produced in the 1980s, and today similar works by local photography students emulates the same themes. It's an insight into a slice of history, a project that encourages people to step back and consider their city in a new light.
Also in future, it'll really inform people about the here and now. So they'll see the technology, the fashion of today, all of which changes over due course, even the demographic makeup of the city. All of those things will change in ways which are not perceptible over the short term, but when we look back over these photos in future decades, it'll make a real difference.
The students spent a month planning their shoot day, giving thought to all aspects of society. Gable wants the students to realise their work can really make a difference once it's in the public arena.
You know, for the most part, their photos at this stage don't get widely circulated outside of their own social media circles, but this is a real opportunity to reach an audience, so they do respond very positively to that.
It's the 4th time the Polytech students have documented the city, and previous images are now in the museum archive. And the visitor experience manager says it's a great way to capture contemporary history.
You know, in 50 years or 100 years, researchers who come into Toitū then will be able to see what life was like today. So it's a great insight into the world we live in.
The 160 digital images are on display in the Research Centre of Toitū for the next year. Dee Karen, The South Today.
Thousands of people flocked to Forsyth Bar Stadium recently for the Dunedin Craft Beer and Food Festival. The event is only 4 years old and was so popular it's sold out in advance. And with the mix of alcohol and food, organisers were happy with the strategies they put in place to ensure everyone had a good time.
The Dunedin Craft Beer and Food Festival entertained, fed and quenched the thirst of 6,200 people under the roof at Forsyth Bar Stadium. It's run by the Otago University Students Association and has managed to get bigger every year. Ticket prices haven't been raised in the 4 years the festival's taken place, and organisers are happy with the strategies they've used to keep everyone safe.
So all these additional kind of games and entertainment really means that people go and they socialise and they have fun with friends. They don't go there to binge drink. So it's a totally different culture that we're encouraging.
The use of a wristband payment system once again proved popular and made paying for drinks and food seamless.
It's very quick, it's used for high density areas such as festivals, and it makes it simple for the user and they can refund it at the end of the day.
Even with so many people on the pitch as well as vendors, organisers feel there's enough room for people to feel comfortable.
We don't want to increase capacity just so we can get a numbers game. We want this to be comfortable for everyone, and that's always going to be at the front of it.
The South Today asked festival goers if they were enjoying the day.
Absolutely 100%.
Yes.
We are. We're marvellous, aren't we? Don't we look funky?
We're having an awesome day.
Yes,
yes.
Very much so, yes.
great day.
We're having a great day. Yeah, loving it.
The atmosphere is very
There
fun
are so
and
many
vibrant.
people here. It's a massive event. It's going to be so great.
Most spectacular day ever.
The OUSA says it's got even more exciting features planned for next year's festival. Dee Karen, The South Today.
And finally, Highlands Motorsport Park in Cromwell was recently host to a world-class motor racing event. Spectators were treated to 4 different racing categories over the 3-day event, and organisers described the action as the most incredible racing New Zealand has seen this year.
Thousands of spectators were enjoying the Highlands 101 endurance race over the weekend. Its modern take on the famous Le Mans running start and compulsory pit stops were all part of the action.
We've got our Australian GT category over here, we have Radical Australia, and then some local heroes in our Highlands 1 hour event, and the crowds have just been insane.
The township of Cromwell was at capacity during the 3-day event.
Can't get accommodation for love nor money. The bars are full, the restaurants are full, and there's an amazing buzz around the place.
Exotic cars were on display and also racing, and the value of them is an estimated $20 million.
It is an absolutely intoxicating spectacle to see that type of value out there with some amazing drivers pushing as hard as they can. You certainly don't need to be a motorsport enthusiast to really appreciate that this is some really cool entertainment.
Spillane says drivers returning for their 4th go at the event rate it as a highly technical circuit, one that doesn't allow time to relax as they're put through their paces.
And then, you know, for them to be driving here, they've got the arid high mountains on one side, the beautiful snow-capped mountains on the other, the sun's shining, it's a blue sky day. It's a pretty stunning environment to be racing in.
Organisers are calling this year's racing the most successful to date. Dee Karen, The South Today.
And that's all for this edition of Southern News Week. You can see more of Southern News by following us on Facebook, YouTube and Twitter, or via our website channel39.co.nz. I'm Holly Buchanan, thanks for watching.
Supporting local content so you can see more of New Zealand on